welcome, please, Linda Ronstadt.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Linda Ronstadt.
There are voices that can make an entire nation fall silent. Linda Ronstadt has one of those voices, crystal clear yet unyielding, gentle yet never bowed. All her life, she let the music speak for her, choosing to step back from showbiz parties and red carpets to keep the song at the center and let silence do the rest. But behind that composure lie scratches that are hard to name. On some nights, after the stage has closed and the lights have gone out, Linda still carried home barbed little jabs that glittered like pins. At times, her fame was borrowed as a springboard for others. There were moments when the boundary of consent was scuffed by the seemingly harmless rock star privilege. And more than once, trust, the one thing she always held onto, was torn to pieces right there in the studio. 8 men passed through Linda's life like storms. Each was an icon of his era, yet each left scars that no halo could conceal. Not love stories, but thorny collisions. Not vendettas, but instances where respect was bent out of shape. Who were those 8 names, and what were the moments that made a woman famed for her calm admit that some wounds, even dusted by time, refused to heal? 1. Paul Simon, a collaboration destroyed by perfectionism and disrespect. After the turbulent chapter with Mick Jagger, Linda Ronstadt focused entirely on recording. In early 1982, she signed a contract to collaborate with Paul Simon, long hailed as one of America's most intelligent songwriters. At that time, Simon was preparing Hearts and Bones, a deeply personal project expected to follow the success of Still Crazy after all these years. Warner Brothers promoted Linda's participation as the key to taking the project global. Their first recording session took place at Studio 55 in Hollywood, California, a legendary place where Fleetwood Mac and Carly Simon had recorded. Every detail drew media attention. According to the Los Angeles Times, March 1983, Simon had the entire sound system rebuilt to optimize natural reverberation. That decision delayed progress and quickly filled the studio with tension. Paul Simon was known for his perfectionism to an extreme. He demanded dozens of takes to fine-tune the pitch of a single harmony. Meanwhile, Linda, who came from a country background, was used to live takes and minimal edits. Friction arose when Simon criticized her approach as unsuitable for a modern sound structure. Sound engineers recalled that the session dragged on for more than 12 hours, with Linda stepping outside repeatedly to regain her composure. Producer Val Garay, who had worked with Linda before, later told Billboard 1985 that she felt insulted when Simon kept ordering her to sing it again until I hear what I want. After 3 sessions, Linda walked away, leaving nothing finished. Initially, Warner Brothers claimed the project was paused for technical reasons, but weeks later, Variety revealed heated disputes inside the label, after Simon demanded that all of Linda's vocals be removed from the mixes. As a result, Hearts and Bones was released in October 1983 without Linda's voice, and it flopped, peaking only at number 35 on the Billboard 200. That same year, Linda released What's New with conductor Nelson Riddle, which sold over 2 million copies within months. The contrast led the American press to call it a stunning reversal of fortune. The controversy deepened when leaks emerged. According to the New York Daily News, a Studio 55 technician claimed Simon said, "Linda doesn't know how to work in a professional environment." The remark outraged the music world. Linda was known for her discipline. Rolling Stone published an editorial titled The Perfection Trap, calling Paul Simon a textbook case of dictatorial artistry in the studio. Linda never responded publicly, but friends said she lost faith in male-female collaborations for nearly a decade afterward. In her 2013 memoir, She wrote simply, "I met someone who made music feel like fear instead of joy." After Paul Simon, Linda thought she had learned how to avoid pain. But fate is rarely that kind. Soon after, another man entered, not with a melody, but with a glance. This time it was Mick Jagger. 2. Mick Jagger, The Hidden Affair. When the wife faced the mistress in the same hotel. By the mid-1970s, Mick Jagger stood at the summit of fame. The Rolling Stones had just completed their Love You Live tour in 1977, and the British press hailed him as the most dangerous man in rock. At that time, Jagger was married to Nicaraguan actress and model Bianca Perez Mora Matias, their union a symbol of glamour and power in global entertainment. Yet behind the glitter, Western tabloids whispered about cracks forming in their marriage. Meanwhile, Linda Ronstadt, America's rising country pop star, had become a familiar face on Time and People. She was the most sought-after voice in Los Angeles, a beacon for independent, fearless women in music. The two met at a post-Grammy party in 1977, hosted by producer Peter Asher at the Beverly Hills Hotel. According to Vanity Fair, Asher introduced them, and their connection was instant, startling the industry. By early 1978, Linda and Mick were seen together at multiple events across California. Paparazzi from the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner captured them, leaving the Chateau Marmont, Mick holding a wine glass, Linda hiding behind a scarf. A week later, Rolling Stone ran the headline "Linda's Dangerous Liaison," hinting this was more than friendship. The scandal erupted because Bianca Jagger was still legally Mick's wife. Though estranged by his wild lifestyle, no separation had been announced. In August 1978, Bianca unexpectedly flew to Los Angeles to confront him. A hotel employee told the Daily Mail of a heated argument among the three that lasted nearly an hour in an 8th-floor suite. No one knew exactly what was said, only that the next morning Linda left the city and canceled her NBC midnight special taping. The British and American press feasted on the story. The Guardian called it a showdown between America's queen and the wife of Britain's rock legend. The spotlight fell hardest on Linda, who had just been named one of People's Women of the Year. Reporters painted her as an unwilling third woman drawn into a broken marriage. In the following months, Linda's image was relentlessly exploited on television. She stayed silent for more than 3 months, avoiding interviews. Friends said she retreated to Santa Fe to stay with Emmylou Harris, escaping the frenzy. Meanwhile, Mick faced renewed scrutiny over his 1967 drug arrest at Redlands, revived by NME and BBC Panorama, worsening his reputation. By early 1979, when the storm had passed, Linda resurfaced for the Mad Love album cover shoot. In an interview with Cameron Crowe, she admitted the affair had taught her the price of believing in the spotlight. Crowe later said Linda never mentioned Mick by name, but every time she paused at stage lights, everyone knew whom she meant. The affair ended, but the wound to her pride did not. Just when the world thought Linda would steer clear of conflict 2 years later, she found herself at the center of another storm, this time on stage before an audience. The man who turned on her was none other than Neil Young, once her comrade in the anti-war movement of the 1970s. 3. Neil Young, Betrayed Ideals. When a comrade became the critic. In 1976, Linda Ronstadt was among America's most beloved voices. Her performances often aligned with causes for peace, for the environment, for the voiceless. At many of these events, she stood beside Neil Young, then hailed as the most authentic anti-war voice of the era. They shared stages in Santa Monica and San Francisco, united by the belief that music could awaken conscience. But that faith began to crumble later that same year. When Linda agreed to partner with Warner Brothers for the biggest tour of her career, partially sponsored by Coca-Cola anti-war circles, called it a compromise. Neil Young stayed silent until they both appeared at the No Nukes benefit concert at Cow Palace. That night, Linda performed 2 songs to roaring applause as NBC cameras zoomed in on her smile. Backstage, Neil watched. When his turn came, the mood changed completely. Critics described a strange tension. No names were mentioned, but everyone sensed a line had been drawn. The next morning, the San Francisco Chronicle ran "The Rift Behind the Stage." Music magazines coined the phrase ideological split in the anti-war movement, with Linda at its center. Neil Young, once her ally, was now seen as the guardian of purity, while Linda was branded the sellout star. Footage of her leaving backstage flooded NBC, her weary face caught in parking lot lights. British media echoed the label. The fallout was brutal. Linda nearly vanished from benefit concerts. Organizers feared backlash from activist groups. Warner Brothers issued a statement affirming her independent stance, but public opinion had already turned. The blow destroyed her, standing in the very movement that once celebrated her. By 1977, when Neil launched the Bridge School benefit, Linda's name was gone from the lineup, though she had helped draft the foundation's early plans. A year later, when Rust Never Sleeps was released, critics noticed Neil thanked those who kept the faith, with Linda conspicuously absent. Rumors in Los Angeles said Linda fell into a deep crisis afterward. She withdrew from social causes, canceled all politically related interviews, and disappeared from the stages that once inspired millions. The industry understood a woman who once believed in conviction had chosen silence after being turned into the opposite by her own ally. After that, Linda no longer believed in the idea of like-minded artists. She returned to the studio, severing ties with the protest movement. But the music world wasn't done testing her. Years later, betrayal returned, not from ideology, but from ingratitude. This time it came from the man she had once mentored when he was just an unknown drummer. His name was Don Henley. Marfor, Don Henley, the protege who turned his back, and the cutting remark that lingers. In the early 1970s, Linda Ronstadt was a name that dominated every stage on the American West Coast. While preparing for the tour promoting the album Silk Purse in 1971, she decided to look for a new band. On the audition list at Sound Factory in Los Angeles was a young drummer from Texas, Don Henley. He had never done an official recording and had no name yet, but Linda saw in him a solid touch and a distinctive ear. She was the one who signed the invitation for him to join her touring band, opening the first door of his later career. Henley performed with Linda for 2 years, roaming across dozens of stages from the Troubadour to the Fillmore West. There he met Glenn Frey, the guitarist, in the same band. The two clicked immediately and decided to split off to form the Eagles in 1972. Not only did Linda not object, she introduced them to producer John Boylan, supported their first recording session, and connected them with Asylum Records. Many critics called Linda the Eagles' uncredited godmother. When the Eagles became a phenomenon, Henley's life changed. From an unknown drummer, he became a symbol of American soft rock. Yet, as the fame rose, the distance between Henley and the person who had lifted him up grew as well. In the spring of 1977, when Linda Ronstadt pivoted toward classic jazz, releasing a series of albums covering old songs by Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald, many were surprised. The press praised it as a bold move, but not everyone approved. Among the skeptics was Don Henley. In an interview on ABC Radio's program Rockline that March, when asked whether he planned to collaborate again with the person who had first given him a break, he answered coolly that Linda was living in nostalgia, singing what others have already done better. The remark spread not only over the airwaves, but was also quoted verbatim by the Los Angeles Times in its March 28, 1977 issue. The media quickly stirred the pot, treating it as a public slight against the very person who had helped him get his start. The reaction within the music community was swift. Some of Linda's close colleagues were indignant. Rolling Stone ran a brief commentary titled "When Gratitude Fades," calling Henley's words a textbook example of the price of fame. Many who had seen Linda as a model of independent artistry now felt sympathy as they watched her be mocked by a former protege in public. Linda herself said nothing, but her actions spoke loudly. 2 weeks later, the organizers of the Living in the USA tour announced the lineup of supporting musicians. Don Henley's name initially appeared on the list, but it was quickly struck out. According to a Variety report, she revoked his tour credentials as soon as she read the article. Producers said Linda maintained absolute silence throughout the meeting, only requesting that all drum parts be replaced for the opening show. After that, she never mentioned Don Henley again. In the following years, whenever reporters brought up that period, Linda avoided answering. But colleagues recounted that she once said there's nothing worse than watching someone you trusted publicly deny your worth to the world. From then on, she steered clear of any projects related to the Eagles despite many invitations. Ironically, just a few years after that cutting remark, Henley was embroiled in a serious scandal in Beverly Hills in 1980 when he was arrested by police for hosting a drug-fueled party, shattering his image as a serious artist. The media dredged up the past and compared the two careers. By then, Linda had triumphed with what's new, while Henley was mired in scandal. People magazine ran a biting line. "The one who was mocked has now become the one still standing." From that point on, Linda Ronstadt never uttered Don Henley's name in any interview. The music world tacitly understood that an unbridgeable gap lay between them. The story became a textbook example of betrayal behind the spotlight, when gratitude is replaced by arrogance. After 1980, Linda withdrew from loud rock stages and went to Laurel Canyon to record more intimate music. But the peace there did not last long. Within that very community of artists often considered her second family, a new crack formed. And the person who dealt Linda another blow was David Crosby, a longtime friend who had once stood beside her through endless recording nights in the 1970s. 5. David Crosby, A Laurel Canyon. Friendship shattered by ego. In the early 1970s, Laurel Canyon felt like a small kingdom tucked amid Hollywood's windy hills. Wooden houses peeped through the trees, and every night rang with guitars, voices, laughter, and the clink of glasses. In that world, Linda Ronstadt and David Crosby were two rare kindred spirits. They often met in the late afternoon gathering with friends in Crosby's cabin on Lookout Mountain, playing unfinished demos for each other, discussing harmony parts and breath control and how to give American music a soul of its own. Crosby used to tell people that Linda was the woman with the most natural musical instincts in Laurel Canyon. They performed together, appeared at friends' sessions, and sat backstage listening to Joni Mitchell or Neil Young try out early songs. Laurel Canyon felt like family then, and Linda believed she was among people who understood and respected each other. Things began to change in 1974 when Asylum Records funded a small experimental project featuring many Laurel Canyon artists. Linda and Crosby were paired for a session on Sail Away, a simple, gentle ballad. At first, the studio buzzed with energy. Crosby brought his 12-string guitar, and Linda needed only a microphone and a few lyric sheets. They ran it once, and the whole crew applauded. But on the second take, Crosby started to intervene. He said the song needed a more modern color, demanded a new meter, a new key, and a different arrangement. Linda fell quiet, trying to keep her voice calm, but each suggestion seemed to turn the song into something else entirely. According to the Los Angeles Times feature, The Canyon in Turmoil, published in 1975, the conflict erupted when Crosby insisted on redoing the entire arrangement Linda had already completed. Engineer Henry Louis recalled the air in the room turning heavy and silent enough to hear a pin drop. Linda kept singing, her tone growing sharper and her eyes colder. Crosby stood behind the glass, shaking his head. Finally, he set his guitar on a chair and walked out. The studio door closed with such finality that the microphone rattled. Linda took off her headphones without a word, stared through the empty glass, then finished the song alone. When Heart Like a Wheel came out at the end of that year, Sail Away became a major hit, topping the Billboard Adult Contemporary chart. America called it music of gentleness and confidence. On the cover of People, Linda appeared with the line, "A voice that can change an era." Somewhere in Laurel Canyon, David Crosby read that with barely concealed irritation. Friends later told Rolling Stone that he believed the song's success came from the harmony concept. "I initiated a claim that angered those who had witnessed the session." Just weeks later, when Rolling Stone prepared a special issue on women in rock, a reporter asked Crosby about the rise of female artists. The November 10, 1975 piece quoted him verbatim. Many famous female singers aren't famous for music, but because the image was crafted the right way. The line cut into Linda like a knife. No names were mentioned, but the public knew exactly whom he meant. The media exploded. The Los Angeles Herald-Examiner ran a forum on substance or image with Linda's photo beside the headline, "The Manufactured Woman." Late-night shows replayed her performances and asked, "Is she truly an artist?" The insult nearly broke her. Linda canceled all recording sessions for the month and skipped every event. A close friend said she sat for hours in her small Laurel Canyon home, no lights on, no music playing, just staring out the window at the dark slope. Artists pushed back hard. Joni Mitchell refused to collaborate with Crosby on an NBC program, and producer Peter Asher, who worked directly with Linda, called his remark proof of patriarchal attitudes embedded in American music. Village Voice ran the rift in Laurel Canyon, describing a place once free-spirited, now split in two by a single sentence. The breaking point came when Linda returned to the stage for a charity concert in Santa Monica in December 1975. Before thousands of fans, she sang, "You're No Good," with such force that the audience shivered. The hall rose to its feet, but Linda bowed briefly and left in silence. Critics wrote that on that night, Linda Ronstadt did not sing to perform. She sang to release her anger. After that, Linda sold her Laurel Canyon home and moved to Malibu. The music world understood that her friendship with David Crosby had ended. There were no apologies and no reunions. They avoided each other at every event and on every guest list. Laurel Canyon, once the home of hippie dreams, remained only as a fractured memory. Years later, in a rare interview on CBS Sunday Morning, Linda said something that left the nation hushed. "When people trample your trust, music stops being a shared language." That line closed an entire era, one in which trust, freedom, and friendship could vanish after a single interview. After leaving Laurel Canyon, Linda chose silence as self-protection. But fate did not stop there. The very next year, she faced another bitter experience where contempt and sexism were laid bare in the studio. The man who hurt her this time had another name, Frank Zappa. 6. Frank Zappa, Sexism and the Belittling of a Woman's Voice. In 1974, Los Angeles was in the throes of experimental music movements. Frank Zappa stood at the center of that creative storm. He was an eccentric composer, a technical genius, and someone the entire scene regarded warily for his fierce temperament. Zappa believed music had to be built on mathematics and theory rather than emotion. Linda Ronstadt, then, at a peak in her career, was the emblem of freedom instinct and an emotion-laden voice. They were introduced by Herb Cohen, who had managed both. The collaboration idea began at a music party in Studio City when Zappa wanted a female voice for a new arrangement in the A token of his Extreme project. Linda agreed not out of curiosity about Zappa, but because she wanted to try something beyond the bounds of pop. No one knew the decision would become one of the worst experiences of her career. The first session took place at Paramount Studios. The room was crammed with instruments, cables, and electronic devices Zappa had designed himself. He asked that the lights be dimmed, leaving a single beam on the central microphone. Linda stepped in, adjusted her headphones, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice rang with feeling warm and clear in every breath. When the take ended, the room fell silent for a few seconds, but Zappa said nothing. He tapped a pencil to the beat, then ordered another take. By the second session, the atmosphere had changed. Zappa intervened more deeply, asking Linda to cut the melismas that sounded too feminine and to change her diction to be less sentimental. Linda remained professional, but felt herself being pushed out of her own music. Those present recalled that Zappa never looked at her when giving directions, speaking only through the engineer, a coldness that felt insulting. According to journalist Mike Barnes in the Los Angeles Free Press in 1975, the conflict peaked when Zappa asked her to re-record the climax in a robot voice. When Linda asked why, he answered with mockery. The room went silent. No one dared speak. After a few stunned seconds, Linda removed her headphones, set them on the table, and walked out. The door closed, echoing off the glass like a blade severing everything. The next day, the session was canceled. Zappa issued a press note saying the project did not meet the standards of experimental spirit. NME later ran a brief interview quoting Zappa. "Some voices are better suited to car commercials than to art." The line was widely seen as a direct jab at Linda Ronstadt. Village Voice shot back, writing that Frank Zappa has confused genius with contempt for women. Linda did not respond. She did not sue or counterattack. She simply disappeared from any project connected to Zappa. Among female artists, the aborted session became a whispered story, evidence of the injustices women endured in a male-dominated industry. In 1976, Linda returned with Hasten Down the Wind, a quiet manifesto. The voice was still soft, but every line seemed to carry strength. Critics wrote that she had transformed hurt into music that even the proudest must bow to. Zappa never mentioned it again. In a late-life BBC interview, he only alluded vaguely to a singer who did not understand my musical philosophy. Yet, in the Los Angeles artist community, that 1974 story lingered like a cut that would not close. Linda, who had once considered the studio her most sacred place, walked out with a heart full of anger and a deeply wounded sense of dignity. From then on, she took no part in experimental projects. She told friends she would never again let her voice be defined by anyone but herself. Still, the music world always finds ways to test the resilient. Just a few years later, Linda found herself in another situation, not in a studio or a professional show, but at a casual party in Los Angeles. There, amid wine smoke and the bravado of a generation of men drunk on fame, a boundary-crossing act turned an ordinary gathering into the most humiliating memory of Linda Ronstadt's life. The man responsible was Jim Morrison. 7. Jim Morrison. Disrespectful behavior toward Linda in front of an audience. In the summer of 1968, Los Angeles was the chaotic capital of rock and liquor. Jim Morrison, the soul of the Doors, was revered as a saint of rebellion, while Linda Ronstadt was just a young singer trying to find her place in a world of men. That night at the Whiskey A Go Go on Sunset Boulevard, Linda attended a post-show party. Morrison was drunk, staggering through the haze of smoke and shouts. As the music faded, he suddenly jumped off the stage, walked to the table where Linda was sitting, and grabbed her hand, pulling her in front of hundreds of people. The spotlight hit her face and drained its color. Morrison wrapped an arm around her waist, pressed her against the microphone, and started to improvise, his voice rough with alcohol. The room fell silent. A few awkward laughs flickered and died. Linda tried to break free, but he held tight. Only when a stagehand stepped up and pulled the mic down did Morrison let go. Linda left the stage and hurried out of the club under the crowd's confused gaze. The next morning, the Los Angeles Free Press reported Morrison causes chaos at the Whiskey A Go Go. The article mentioned a smashed microphone, but not the woman dragged on stage. Within the artist community, however, the story spread quickly. Friends said Linda went quiet for weeks, turned down all performance invites, and stayed home to record. What terrified her was not Morrison himself, but the silence of the entire room that night. Morrison kept swaggering along. When asked about the incident on KPFK, he said only that women tend to exaggerate. Melody Maker quoted the line, leaving a stain in the eyes of those who had admired him. Linda still did not respond. She chose silence, and that silence carried more weight than any accusation. After the whiskey, Linda changed completely. She stopped going to parties, avoided rock shows, and appeared only when she could control the stage. Journalist Jerry Hopkins wrote that this incident led Linda to form her own band, hiring only male musicians who respected women. No one could drag her up just to make a spectacle of her, Hopkins wrote in Rolling Stone. Years later, when Vanity Fair asked about it, Linda said talent does not save anyone from their own cruelty. Short, cold, and final, it closed the most bitter memory of her life. Morrison died in 1971 in Paris, but the image of that night remained a scar that never faded. From then on, Linda became tougher and took control of every part of her career. Yet just as she stood firm in the spotlight, the punk wave rose with a young, arrogant face, unafraid to attack her in public. That man was Elvis Costello. 8. Elvis Costello, Costello's contempt toward Linda. By the late 1970s, when Linda Ronstadt was at her peak selling millions of records and landing on the cover of Rolling Stone, Elvis Costello was only beginning to break through in the new British punk wave. He was young, sharp, and swaggering, intent on smashing the glossy shell of American pop. To Costello, singers like Linda were the emblem of the safe music punk was born to resist. The story began in 1978 when Linda covered Costello's Allison for her album Living in the USA. Her version had a bright pop sheen quite unlike the original's icy bite. The album sold over 2 million copies, putting Elvis Costello's name on radio stations across America. But instead of gratitude, Costello showed disdain. In an interview with New Musical Express, he said Linda's cover was a waste of vinyl. The remark detonated in the press. The Los Angeles Times ran the headline, "Elvis Costello attacks Linda Ronstadt," while Billboard wrote, "A rising artist uses his own song to take down the person who brought it to the masses." Linda did not reply, but her actions spoke clearly. On her year-end tour, she dropped Allison from the set list and replaced it with a song called Mad Love. Coincidentally or not, that became the title of her album 2 years later, A Quiet Rejoinder. As Linda kept silent, Costello poured fuel on the fire. At a Toronto press conference in 1979, asked again about the matter, he shrugged and said, "Some people just make music sound nicer so they can sell more of it." CBC replayed the line dozens of times, riling the American public. Newspapers that adored Linda criticized Costello as arrogant and lacking compassion. What hurt Linda was not just the words. Years later, a producer who had worked with both told Variety that at a post-Grammy party, Costello deliberately avoided shaking her hand, even though they were only a few steps apart. Linda saw it, gave a faint smile, and turned away. For her, that was the moment she understood the man behind the song she had once been eager to record. In 1980, Linda released Mad Love, pivoting to a tougher new wave sound and a fiercer vocal edge. Critics called it a musical answer to those who belittled her. Rolling Stone wrote, "Linda Ronstadt does not answer with words but with force." The album reached number 3 on Billboard, while Costello had to suspend his tour after a racist incident scandal in Ohio. Years later, Costello said he had been young and foolish, but Linda never revisited the topic. Asked about it on a CBS program, she said only, "I don't hate anyone. I just hate the way some people use talent to insult others." Gentle words that cut like a fine blade into an old memory. To Linda, Elvis Costello was not merely someone who sneered at one recording, but a representative of the contempt for women she had fought throughout her career. The string of hurts from Mick Jagger, Paul Simon, Neil Young, Don Henley, David Crosby, Frank Zappa, Jim Morrison to Costello etched a belief into her great music is not born from arrogance, but from respect. And perhaps it was from these very wounds that Linda Ronstadt became one of the rare women of her century able to stand alone in a male-dominated rock world, needing no rebellion and offering no retorts, only raising a voice that could silence even those who once looked down on her. Now, as the stage lights have dimmed and that voice has fallen silent because of illness, Linda Ronstadt still holds on to the most precious thing of all, her dignity. Those who once heard her from arrogant stars to quiet betrayers are now only memories along a long road she walked with steadiness and silence. For Linda's strength never lay in fighting back, but in the ability to stand firm amid the storm of fame. And when she finally spoke, the whole world could do nothing but listen. What about you? If it were you, would you choose silence to protect yourself or confrontation to demand respect? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the stories that unfold behind the spotlight.